Hello, everybody, and welcome to another in our series of debates as we look forward to the primary that's coming on August 23rd. And yes, I know it's very weird to be having a primary election in August in New York, but you can thank all the redistricting that's going on. It's probably been a lot of fun for everybody that's been running for office, certainly for all of you, because everything has changed a bit. This round is going to pit candidates for the state Senate and the congressional races. And tonight, we are talking with the candidates in the primary in Senate District, New York Senate District 34, which is the changes in it now includes Parkchester, Pelham, City Island, a little bit of Westchester, New Rochelle. But you guys can fill us in on all the details of that a little later on. Before we get started, I want to talk about the format. Of course, I should introduce myself. I'm Jane Hanson, along with Steve Witt, who is the political editor for PoliticsNY for Schneps Media. Hey, at least a wave, okay, Steve?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just had to answer Slack. I'm really sorry.
He's answering Slack in the middle of a debate.
I'm editing a story. I'm really sorry because I'm also the editor and I just have to. Just keep going, Jane.
There's never a dull moment for our man, Steve. So the way we're going to do this tonight is an opening statement. Each of you will have a 2-minute limit on your statements. Steve, among his other many jobs, is also going to be the timekeeper. So when you see him wave and then wave even more frantically, that means basically shut up. Then we will have a round of questioning by the two of us. Each of you will have a minute to respond. If you would like to respond to something one of the other candidates says, feel free to jump in. You will have a minute to do that. And then we're also going to have a portion of this debate where we're going to have you ask each other a couple of questions, depending upon how much time we have. And then at the end, a closing statement, again, 2 minutes each. So we thank you, the three of you, for joining us tonight. And let me introduce you now.
And real quick, I am the timekeeper. And if I give a little wave, did you say that already, Jane?
I did say that, but it's good to repeat it because you have got a wave extraordinaire.
Yeah, if I give a little wave, that means your time is up and kind of wrap it up. If I give a second wave, that means like really wrap it up. And then a couple seconds after that, I will say time. All right.
Yeah. And we'll cut you off. All right. So we're going to start with Christian Amato, who is from, let's see, Christian, I'm not sure what town you live in. Or what part of the Bronx you live in.
I live in the Bronx on Pelham Parkway.
Okay, good. I had Pelham Parkway written here, and then I went, wait a minute, is that correct? We have John Perez, who is the Assembly District Leader, also, of course, from the Bronx. And then Nathalia Fernandez, who has been the Bronx Assemblywoman representing District 80. So thank you to all of you for being with us tonight. And now I'm going to let you make your opening statements. And we're going to do, guess what? Ladies first. Nathalia?
Thank you so much, Jane. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Schneps Media, for bringing this debate tonight. I'm Assemblywoman Nathalia Fernandez, currently representing the 80th District in the Bronx, and I'm a proud Latina and the daughter of immigrants. And like many, my story started with my family coming to this country to seek opportunities. I've been a present, resilient, and reliable voice for my community, and I'm looking forward to continue my advocacy when it comes to mental health awareness, school funding, building climate resiliency, improving our infrastructure, increasing transit access, and bringing good jobs to this community. So for this debate, I'm excited to hear the questions, to talk about our experiences and our plans moving forward. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Now let's go to John.
Hi, good evening. My name is John Perez, and I'm the former 87th Assembly District Leader. I gave it up a while back, but I am a lifelong resident of the Bronx, and the youngest of three. I've been raised pretty much with respect, religion, morals, and values. And those I live by, and I am committed to carrying on that and passing it down to my children. I'm also a retired Army combat veteran, and I served 18 years, traveled the entire world, and I know the diversities that we have here. I've experienced them at their hometown. I want to bring that experience to the state Senate and pretty much try to deal with the situations and the issues that we're faced with today.
Okay, thank you, John. Christian.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, and thank you, Politics New York and Schneps Media for holding this debate. My name is Christian Amato. I'm a proud Democrat, the proud son of Italian immigrants, and a lifelong resident of this district. I'm a first-generation Bronxite. This community is my home. I'm deeply rooted in this district. I know the stakeholders from Soundview to City Island and Pelham to New Rochelle. My family lives here, my friends live here, and I've organized side by side with so many in this community. My family came to this country in search of a brighter future. Like so many of the immigrant families who live here, my grandfather actually opened up a dry cleaner on Arthur Avenue. That's where my parents met. And after they married, they opened up their own dry cleaner in Belmont as well. My parents worked hard for that future that my grandparents had hoped for when they first came here. They bought a house on Pelham Parkway, started a family, and raised my brother and I. As the son of immigrants, I'm familiar with the struggles that face immigrant families. That's why I first got my start organizing to connect immigrants to DACA benefits a decade ago. As your senator, I know I'll be ready to lead on day one. I come with the experience that will ensure that our district is prioritized equitably. I served District 34 as Senator Biaggi's Deputy Chief of Staff and District Director, where I set up her district office and became familiar with the shared issues our communities face. After helping defeat the IDC and working for the senator, I went on to run several campaigns overlapping with the district to get Democrats elected across the Bronx and Westchester. My name is Christian Amato, and it's a pleasure to be here today.
All right, you just got the wave, and in good time though. So let's start. Each of you has been talking about your families, where you came from, your backgrounds, etc. But I haven't heard in any of that what you're going to do and what main issue will be your priority. So Christian, I'm going to start with you. If you win the primary, if you win the election, what is it that you are going to fight for first in Albany for the people that you will represent?
Absolutely. That's an easy question. I've knocked 20,000 doors on this campaign, and from Soundview all the way to Pelham and New Rochelle, the concerns are unanimous when it comes to climate change and its impact on our crippling infrastructure. You see, our sewer system across the Bronx and Westchester is over 100 years old, and right now, these systems can't handle the influx of heavy storm rains that we've seen from hurricanes like Sandy and Ida. So my first priority will be addressing this infrastructure and addressing our climate resiliency. First, by passing bills like the CCIA and Build Public Renewables.
What's the CCIA?
Climate Community Investment Act,
Okay.
which would create a carbon tax of $35 a pound of carbon charged to our state's biggest polluters. So we'd pass the CCIA, we'd pass the Build Public Renewables Act, and try to decrease our reliance on fossil fuels, as well as the All Electric Buildings Act, which would convert our buildings in New York to fully electric. These proposals would help us reduce our connection to fossil fuels and lead towards a more climate sustainable future. But it'll also help the on-the-ground impact that communities continue to face. The 34th Senate District is a coastal community hugging the Sound shore from New Rochelle all the way down to the Soundview border. And because of that, the threat of flooding is something that everyone in this district knows all too well. Too many constituents have lost property, have lost cars, and rising sea levels threaten thousands of homeowners. So these policies are a top priority.
Well, I understand that, but what you're talking about right now is expending an awful lot of money because going green does not come cheap. Where's that money going to come from?
Well, first of all, by passing the CCIA, we'd be creating a $15 billion pot that we'd be able to tap into through a carbon tax. So there'd be a lot of money coming from there. In addition, our state is sitting on a ton of money from the federal government, from the Build Back Better Fund. And so we do have quite a bit of money. Our state is one of the wealthiest economies in the world. And when we're considering our climate and the sustainability of our planet, I think we have to prioritize that over the cost of the entire thing.
I got it, but who pays the carbon tax?
Our biggest polluters, major corporations polluting our state, poisoning the air we breathe, the water we drink.
So the people don't pay for it.
Correct, it'd be corporations.
Maybe though in higher bills that they get.
You know, I'm sure
Abilities?
that corporations would try to pass that along onto the consumer, and that's where the legislature can step in and create additional protections to ensure that corporations polluting our environment fully own our climate resiliency.
Okay, Natalia, let's can you answer that same question about what would you address first? I know you've been in the assembly for a while and you're well known for many of the things that you've done there. And you're very well aware of the issues. But what would you like to do first if elected to the Senate?
Thank you. Well, regarding climate resiliency, I've been an advocate on that. I've already been a co-sponsor and helped to push these legislations passed in the Assembly. So that is something to continue to work on and to make sure that these laws do come into effect in the best way. And being a supporter too of electrifying our buildings, we need to look at upgrading the power grid so we can support the electricity that we will be using in that. But one of my biggest priorities right away is to get our small businesses stronger and up and running, building new businesses, opening new businesses. And one way to do that is to look at the property taxes that commercial businesses are really stuck paying and suffering from being able to pay. So I absolutely want to address the property tax issue, making sure that home ownership is actually affordable, because when we talk about building generational wealth, we need to make sure that we can afford this and that the jobs that this city and state offers can allow us to buy homes and sustain these homes and pass them on to our children. And for our businesses, I've been very proud to be nominated and voted to be the subcommittee chair in the Black, Hispanic, Asian, Puerto Rican caucus, the legislative caucus, as a subcommittee for MWBEs and economic development. And we've started conversations to see how the jobs that come with green infrastructure can come right into the district, how we can alter the formula so property taxes on commercial businesses aren't that high and people can actually keep their businesses open. And the more businesses that we open locally, the more Bronxites that we bring into the picture, issuing MWBE contracts, more of them. This is the key to making sure that our local economy is thriving, is flourishing, and that Bronxites can work and live in their communities.
Okay, I'm going to address the same question to you, John. What will you?
Yeah, I mean, these are all great answers, and they're. I mean, we've discussed these things in the past. I mean, as far as the environmental impact that our city has, our boroughs have been facing, I've been dealing with this for over 20 years. We've looked at this when I started Nos Quedamos, which is an organization that revitalized a 100-block radius in the South Bronx. I was very, very instrumental in putting that piece together. We addressed the environmental impact as well as the social economic impact of the area. I've been dealing with this for a very, very long time. The proposals that Christian Amato is talking about, we're 20 years in the making of that and passing these laws. There's already been environmental impact studies that have been made, have been done, have been conducted. There's already been some funding, but the price tag is astronomical, and it's going to be on the backs of the working families. Again, putting the burden on the working families. As far as electrifying, we're so far behind the curveball on that that we're not even gonna touch that for another 20 years. And to pass any legislation at this point, I don't think that is going to even be considered in the state Senate or the state assembly anytime soon. Maybe for the next 10 years, that will be a possibility. Right now, what we have to do is that we have to sustain what we have and work towards a better future. Taxing people and having them provide more funding, taxing people is not the answer. And if you want to go address the carbon issues, we need to start with our yellow buses that seem to be all over the place and are spewing carbon all over the place. So if you want to address carbon issues immediately, we have to address those. Let's try to get those buses electrified, and then we can move forward to anything else.
Okay, I appreciate all of you talking about climate control and all of that big picture issues, which are going to take a long time. And yes, I think we're all in agreement that we need to get that done. But let's talk about how we're going to be safe, how our kids are going to be safe in the schools, what are we going to do about guns? What are we going to do about making sure that we have, that we're making sure that people, I mean, crime's up in the city. We got to do something about it. How are we going to do that? John?
I don't know if it's you or me, but I'm freezing frame freezing. I don't know for some reason. So I don't know if it's at your end or at my end. The question was something related to violence, gun violence, schools.
Yep.
Okay.
Violence in general. What are we going to do?
Okay, violence in general. Well, I'm the oldest one in the panel. I'm also the only one that has children. I'm a single dad raising a newly just turned 13-year-old daughter, and it's very difficult to deal with a 13-year-old. Yeah, you have to be the example of that child so that she doesn't follow in any bad habits that we may have been picked up throughout our lives. But definitely being a part of her life, living in her world instead of forcing her to live in mine, trying to see the world through her eyes. Yes, there are concerns that she has brought up to me about crime, about guns, about statements that are made in schools, about gangs in schools. I mean, she's in middle school and they're talking about gangs in school. I'm like, give me a mathematical equation and I can solve that. Crime is not an easy thing, but it is something definitely that we have to address. Right now, with the ghost guns being an issue, we have to address that immediately. We were able to address things back in the Rockefeller times when they did the RICO laws. We have to really put foot to butt on this and let these companies know that your equipment is providing unsafe items to our communities. And if we cannot register those weapons through those means, then we have to register the manufacturing portion of it so that we can track it that way.
Okay, how about the other two? Nathalia, what about guns, violence, schools, safety, keeping the streets safe for our children? I mean, it's just out of hand.
For sure. And everyone in this community, in this district, deserves to feel safe in their neighborhood. And I've taken drastic steps, actual tangible steps, funding to help make sure that the safety is up in our neighborhood. In this district, we have the Jacoby Hospital SUV program, Standing Up to Violence, which is a violence intervention program that brings individuals from a time of gang violence who were former convicts back into the community to address the crime and the organization that might be happening under the radar. I was one of the first elected officials locally to actually give some money to support and expand their efforts. And before the pandemic, we did see that this was a program working and had reduced gun violence up to 30%. And what it is, they speak to the victims of gun violence and any other community violence within the emergency room to really see what's happening in the neighborhoods. And for our schools, I absolutely support safe schools, and we need to have safer schools. And I brought that organization to one of my main high schools, Columbus Educational Campus, to build a bridge and a relationship with our administrators and principals there to the mentors and community leaders that come from this organization, because many times, and I've been right there, where an altercation happened after school between the young people. We need to provide more programs for them so they have other things to do. I've been very supportive of expanding after school programs, funding my local community centers in our NYCHAs, the Amato and John Perez community coalitions, to give students every opportunity to do something different, to put them on a path to real success. And I've done so even by bringing a youth job fair to that high school, so students can see that that's an opportunity right after high school and currently in high school to get a job, because we know that crime is rooted in poverty, and the solution to poverty is giving people work.
Mm-hmm. I can see that John has raised his hand because I think he wants to react to something you've said, Nathalia. John?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Throwing money at a program doesn't always solve the issues. Opening up community centers, yes, very important, but also cost effective. Where's the money going to come from? We had centers open before. The state and the Senate and the city council decided that wasn't needed. We needed to cut the budget. Unfortunately, every time that we cut a budget, it first starts with our youth. We have people walking into schools with guns, knives. NYPD has done constant reports on this. I'm not saying that the programs that Life Up Guns Down doesn't work and other organizations that are out there, that they don't work, but they don't work. They're not working at the level that it should be working. So we have to actually go into the street and talk to these kids. Now, putting a program together. Now, let me tell you, I have a program that I put together and I'm putting together, it's very difficult to get funding for it, to have kids from high school operate a printing shirt operation. They would actually design the shirts for their schools. They would actually do the political pamphlets for these elected officials. They would do all the literature, not all of it, but they would do a percentage. Now that comes with a contractual obligation. If you want to get kids out of the street, give them something meaningful to do. I'm going to teach them a trade. They can take this anywhere they want. And I want to see how many elected officials, when it's time for them to campaign, how many of them are going to contribute to these kids.
All right, thank you, John. I see Christian's hand is up.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, first of all, we have to address the very clear fact: the data doesn't lie. When we have a very well-funded summer youth employment program, that's when gang activity goes down. That's because kids have something to do, they're earning a living wage, they have a job, and that keeps them away from gang activity in these communities. So the first thing we have to do is make sure that we're fully funding summer youth employment programs and youth job opportunities so that our kids have something to do to keep them away from these sorts of activities. Second of all, when it comes to funding, the state has tons of money in its SNUG program, its Stand Up to Violence programs that it can allocate. However, it also comes down to being able to distribute that money across the district. Most of the times it's concentrated to, like Assemblymember Fernandez said, Jacoby Hospital for this district. We have to make sure we're allocating that to other areas of the community, areas like Soundview, areas like New Rochelle. So in order to be able to do that, we're going to have to build more gun violence prevention initiatives across the district. Secondly, 870 people in New York a year die from gun violence, and the state is paying $321 million in funding, taxpayer funding, to pay for gun violence in this state. We need to be focused on strengthening gun measures. That means better consumer safety, micro-stamping new handguns, removing guns from state capitals and demonstrations was something that the legislature passed this year in the extraordinary session, but we can go far further. New York has to be an innovator when it comes to strengthening our gun laws, and that means establishing school threat assessment teams and funding for services for victims of gun violence as well.
Got you. Nathalia, did you also raise your hand?
I did, and I just have to say, I'm glad that both these gentlemen agree that funding can be used to further implement gun safety programs to keep our community safe.
So I'm going to ask a question here, all right? Can you hear me? This is my internet connection is unstable.
We can hear you.
I believe the budget, and I don't have it in front of me, was $220 billion, in excess of $220 billion, the fiscal year budget. And that is the second largest in the country, only behind California. And I'm wondering if any three of you could tell me where a lot of that is stimulus money that's going to run out. And there is a question that wealthier people are leaving the state. Where would you possibly look to trim the fat off a future budget, if anywhere?
Nathalia, you've been in the state assembly, so maybe you can.
Yes. Well, I don't think we necessarily have to trim the fat because everything that we put money towards has been for critical need. I've seen the budget request. I've sat with the many organizations throughout the state to see exactly where this money is going. But when that stimulus money does dwindle, we do have to look at other avenues. The new cannabis industry. The Bronx is a place where we will be getting most of that money. That was a specific point in the legislation that we passed, that communities that have been impacted by the old cannabis laws will receive more money. So that is an avenue. I'm also supportive of looking at the ultra rich, the billionaires in this state, and having them pay a little bit more of a fair share. It is
Yeah, but
really
what
good.
about all of them that might have left because they fled when the pandemic hit?
They have not left. That's a farce.
I think many of them
Let me ask you
have.
a question. Nathalia, you grew up, you said a daughter of immigrants. When you were growing up, I'm sure your parents struggled a little with money and they had to make some tough choices on money to spend. And I'm sure they cut back on something. And so I'm wondering if you were, now you're like the parent in the government, if you were to become a state senator, would you like look if you know, it's some things?
Well, okay, sure. Yes,
them?
there are areas, and one criticism that I gave this past a budget cycle was pet projects. You know, we put $1 billion to a stadium. We could have utilized that money for many different emergency needs coming out of this pandemic and currently now. So looking at the pet projects is something that I think we can trim.
Okay, now I want to get to
Excuse me,
Stephen.
I have my hand raised. I'd like to answer.
Oh,
this.
I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Go
Thank
ahead,
you. No, it's
Christian.
okay. I think there's plenty of ways we can bring money into the state. We don't need to cut our budget. We have to find ways to monetize. First and foremost, we have to invest in the Web3 industry and digital currency. There are plenty of ways that this is a new frontier that can be generating a lot of revenue for our state, and we have to find ways to work with it. I think that's incredibly important, and New Yorkers can't be left behind by excluding Web3 and digital currency, especially since we're the financial capital of the world. Second of all, culture is at the core of New York State's economy. For the past decade, New York's creative economy has contributed 7% to the GSP annually. Pre-pandemic, it generated 484,000 jobs and $120 billion in economic activity. So for me, I think we have to be making more investments in our tourism, in Broadway, in bringing Broadway back and making sure that it is generating the revenue that it used to, providing the jobs that it used to, and stimulating our creative economy through a vibrant arts and culture policy platform that helps us raise more money for our state.
All right, and John's raised his hand, and then after this, we're going to move on. So John, go for it.
All right, thank you. You know, like I said, again, all of these ideas are great, but it's not helping the 34th district itself. When you talk about all of these different areas where you can generate funding, yeah, that's for the state of New York, and yes, that is our purpose, to pass legislation to correct laws that were passed. We don't even know how, but what is that going to do? Broadway is not going to give my district the money that it needs.
John, that's
so
not
when
true.
we're talking about Bitcoin and all of this other stuff, it's not going to do that. What's going to generate funding for the district is—
John, that's not true. First of all, as a state senator, you have to think about the entire state. You're passing legislation that impacts everybody, not just your district.
If you want to,
our district is largely devoid of arts and culture.
Raise your hand, and I'm pretty sure that the moderator will actually let you respond to the question that I have. You have.
Okay, so your question, basically, Christian, is you're saying that that's not true, that money raised in Broadway, et cetera, will benefit the people of the Bronx. Is that what you're saying?
It's going to benefit people all over the state. If we can fund the Broadway Bridges program, that ensures that every New York high school student can see a Broadway show before they graduate high school. This is not just important for them to experience our cultural capital. It's important for them to learn the art of empathy, to learn a new skill, to experience something different and expand their horizons. And after this pandemic, kids deserve a little bit of empathy. So funding like this is incredibly important to creating an ecosystem that's beneficial to our youth.
Well, definitely, my child deserves that opportunity. I'm the only one that has a child in this panel. I know firsthand what my child needs, and if she needs to go to Broadway to see a show on Broadway, I'm going to take her to see a show on Broadway. But I also do know that the schools prior to the pandemic would take children to see Broadway shows.
All right, so we want to do one quick little thing here, which is we want to have each of you ask one question of somebody else on the panel. So John, why don't you go first? Ask Christian a question.
Christian or Nathalia.
Or Nathalia, whoever you please.
Or Nathalia. Christian Amato, there is a photograph circulating of you holding up a banner or a poster denouncing.
His screen froze, I believe.
How do you feel about defunding the police, still defunding the police, and do you still feel the same way?
I don't support defunding the police. As a matter of fact, I think in 2019, when we had seen the brutal murder of George Floyd and seen—
Were you not holding up a sign that says all cops are bastards?
Do you want me to finish responding to you, or do you want to just cut me off?
All right.
Well, you interrupted me before, so I might as well just do the same.
Well, you asked me a question, John. Let me answer.
Go on.
So in 2019, After the brutal murder of George Floyd, I believe that our society was extremely fired up. And I believe that budgets are fluid documents. And back in 2019, it absolutely made sense to look at areas of the police budget, say the mounted unit or the press unit, which receive billions of dollars, and reallocate that money into community programs. Now, coming out of this pandemic in 2022, I don't believe that moving money out of the police department is a smart idea. We need to invest in training. We need to restore the dignity of being an officer. I know the photograph you're referring to. I've spoken about this publicly. I believe that it was a lapse in my judgment to be photographed with that sign. And more importantly, when I was photographed with that sign, it was in a moment where I was working with the police department to clean up and escort protesters out of that event. That being said, I do not believe in the phrase ACAB. I do not believe that. I don't utter it. In addition, I do not believe in defunding the police. I believe in funding the police, restoring public safety, training our officers and making them better prepared to handle situations. And I think that as a state senator, you actually have very little purview over the police department. That's something that is handled in the New York City Council. And so I would not be using my platform to really handle matters involving our police department.
All right, your time is up. Nathalia, question for somebody?
Christian, I want to believe that you think that our state senator should be transparent and honest, correct?
Absolutely.
Is there a reason why you have not filed your campaign filing since January?
Absolutely, yes. So when I went to file my filing, the EFS system, which we've all used, is supposed to send you a one-time authentication code. Upon my efforts to submit my filing, it did not send me my code. I worked with the BOE, they've regained access, and my filing will be live this week.
All right, thank you. And
Could I respond
like
to
to
a
answer-
question? I need
like
to
to ask a
respond to
question.
that buffoonery.
What
I'm
buffoonery?
sorry, what are you suggesting, John?
Ma'am, I would like to respond to Christian's answer.
How
If I
about what, the
can.
sign?
30 seconds, 30
Yes.
seconds.
30
Well, his
seconds.
explanation, 30 seconds. I have 30 seconds to debunk you. Now,
You just
do
wasted.
you realize that one action was so critical that so many people were hurt, communities were devastated by that one action that you did? Imagine if you were to pass a bill or introduce legislation or stand in the front and say, we're going to go for this. How catastrophic that decision would have been. You made a mistake then, and you're going to continue to mistake, and not to accept your reality right now.
Thank you. And Christian, you have a question for a candidate?
Absolutely. I have a question for Assemblymember Fernandez. In 2019, advocates across our district took on a group of Democrats known as the IDC, also known as the Independent Democratic Conference, a breakaway group of Democrats that traded votes with the Republicans in exchange for bribes and who stalled progress on many issues important to this district and to all New Yorkers. At that time, if I recall correctly, you allied yourself and supported the IDC, which essentially gave control of the state Senate to the Republicans and blocked Democrats' ability to get anything done in the legislature. So in 2018, you actively supported IDC members. Can you explain why you supported the IDC and tell us whether your thinking has changed on the importance of the issues they purposely stalled progress on back then? And are you getting any support in this campaign from folks who supported the IDC?
Well, 2018 was the year that I also ran for office, and I supported my local senator, who I have seen to build up community leaders and to be a strong advocate and deliver on constituent services for the 80th Assembly District. And currently, I could not say if I know anyone who was supporting IDC is supporting me now, but I know that those that are supporting me because, again, I have been a present, reliable, consistent member of this community and elected officials that returns the call, that answers the call, and that continually delivers for my community.
All right. Well,
Assemblymember Fernandez, it was published that Marisol Alcantara, a member of the IDC, actually held a fundraiser for you. Just to clarify, if you were wondering if any IDC members were supporting you.
Okay, well, I appreciate the support of Marisol Alcantara. She is a strong Latina and a trailblazer at the time that delivered a lot for this state and for her district when she was a senator.
All right. Well, so we thank all of you for joining us this evening. We unfortunately are out of time. But what I do wish all of you is a very happy next 2 or 3 weeks of campaigning, and we will see who will.
We can give each a minute for a closing comment, Jane.
One minute. I mean, it has to be really tight because I'm getting the rap signals here.
Okay, all right.
1 minute.
And I will time it to the T. All right.
Let's start with John.
Thank you. Thank you very much for hosting this tonight. I just want to get a couple of things out. My vision for the 34th is to bring the first military high school academy to the 34th district with the charter of West Point or the military, New York Military Academy. I'd also like to bring the trade schools in partnership with our laborers and unions. Those are my biggest two things. And finally, the most important piece is introduce legislation that will require the state and assembly to publish a risk assessment associated with any consideration of law. Any consideration of law. A risk assessment is the most important component of any law, and how is it going to negatively or positively impact our communities. Those are my three biggest things, and I hope that you remember me on the 23rd of August. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Christian?
Hi there. Thank you so much for having us. From Soundview to Parkchester, Pelham Bay to Pelham, and Throggs Neck to New Rochelle, I've proudly connected our community to resources and fought for policies that will strengthen the working class. As the son of a union sheet metal worker, the son of immigrants, and a first-generation Bronxite, I share the lived experiences of many in our community. As your state senator, my focus will be to restore our community's faith in public service. I'm the only candidate in this race with a roadmap for our community with 11 policy positions, including public safety, climate change, transit and infrastructure, and defending reproductive rights here in New York to combat the recent decisions from the Supreme Court. Please check out my website, christianamato.com, and I look forward to your support at the polls on August 23rd. I'm Christian Amato, and I look forward to being your champion in Albany.
Thank you. Natalia.
Thank you so much again, Jane and Steve, and to Schneps Media and PoliticsNY for this debate. It was very enjoyable. But I am your neighbor, your elected official right here that has been your voice, your partner in the jobs that we need to get done here. I have a track record you can actually count on. I'm not saying I will do things. I have done things when it comes to sponsoring legislation and being on top of the issues when it comes to climate resiliency, building our local economy, and keeping our community safe. And I intend to keep that initiative forward when I enter the state Senate to represent the greater East Bronx and Westchester. We deserve somebody who has the experience, who has the knowledge of how our state functions and how to actually deliver tangible results for our community. And I'm committed to doing so and ready to do so on day one. So please vote for me, Nathalia Fernandez, on August 23rd. You can see more about my plans and ideas and my experiences and the endorsements that I've received on my website, fernandezforsenate.com. And I'm proud to say I've been endorsed by some of our greatest unions that have many members here in the 34th, including 1199, TW Local 100, CWA, RWDSU, and more. Thank you so much.
All right. That's quite the list. Natalia, thank you. John, Christian, and again, good luck on the campaign trail. I'm sure our paths will cross once more. And people, anybody watching, please remember to vote on August 23rd. I know it seems like an unusual date, but it's your civic duty and we need you to do it. Stephen, as always, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
we'll see both of you. We're doing another one tonight at 9 o'clock. So we'll see you then. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye.